Good morning. My name is Alejandro Vivas. I am a public participation specialist for the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's webinar. It is webinar number 9, Hazardous Waste Management Workshop, Advancing Environmental Justice, Examples and Opportunities for Integrating Environmental Justice in DTSC's programs. Thanks for taking the time out of your morning to join us. I'm going to go ahead and go over a few housekeeping items first to get us started. Now, this morning we're using Zoom. So we will be enabling the Q&A box so that you can ask questions. But right now I will go over our language and captions options. Is our presentation being shared?
I do not see it.
There we go. All right, so first let's go over some language and caption options. This webinar is being presented in English and Spanish if you'd like. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll find the interpretation icon, which you can press, and you will get the option to use English or Spanish. If you are phoning in, go ahead and go down to the More option, and you will press the language interpretation option, and there you will have either English or Spanish that you can choose, and you should go ahead and hear our interpreters in Spanish once you press that option. Thanks again to our interpreters for joining us this morning. Next slide, please. Okay, a couple of housekeeping items. As I mentioned, we're using Zoom today, and so Google Chrome, Safari, or Firefox are the best browsers. It kind of helps things run smoothly for this webinar, so please use those browsers. As I mentioned, we're using the Q&A box, so please do not put your questions into the chat. We'd like you to put them in Q&A, so that way we have a more presentable, easy way to keep track of the questions that have been asked and answered. Also, your camera and microphone features have been disabled, so please keep in mind that you will not be able to see each other. But this session will be recorded. As all our other workshops have been recorded, you can go back and take a look at anything you might have missed, but just please keep in mind this will be recorded. And also, at the end of the session, we're going to go ahead and put out a survey so that we can tell how we're doing and what we can do better. So please take a look at that and fill it out at your convenience. Next slide. So for further information, you can use the QR code up on your screen or go to our DTSC Hazardous Waste Management Plan website. That site is also on your screen. And you can join our e-list for updates. That way we send you emails basically keeping you apprised as to what's going on. Now, if you want to email us, please do so at dtsc_hwplan@dtsc.ca.gov. You can go ahead and send us any questions or concerns you have there, and Felice will go ahead and drop that in our chat box. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over. We have two special guests with us today. We have our director, Ms. Butler is joining us today, as well as our Office of Environmental Equity Deputy Director, Celine Grant. So a couple of special guests with us today to talk about environmental justice in DTSC. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan Dominguez. He is our supervising hazardous waste supervisor. And he is going to go ahead and kick things off this morning.
And thanks, Alejandro. And I'm actually just going to point it right to Katie and Serlene to start. We kind of reorganized a little bit. And,
reorganized on me, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. And Katie, why don't you go ahead and take it away, and then Serlene, and then I can pick up from there.
Thanks, Ryan. We are flexible and adaptive at DTSC.
Not flexible.
All right. Thank you, Alejandro, as well. I am Katie Butler, the newly minted director of DTSC. Really happy to be here this morning with all of you. Thank you for joining this important workshop focused on environmental justice. Environmental justice remains a priority for me as I'm stepping into this new role as director, along with enforcement, enforcing, to the fullest extent possible using our authority that we have at DTSC to enforce our hazardous waste laws is a top priority for us and will continue to be through the development of this hazardous waste management plan. And so, just over the recent years, our department has been engaged in more environmental justice task force across the state, from those in Los Angeles to West Oakland, around metal shredders, and many other initiatives and projects that we work on together with our partner agencies and community organizations. So I'm really looking forward to this workshop to hear questions and comments and thoughts from all of you on how we can strengthen our work here and leverage, our existing initiatives, and also look at new opportunities in the future to make our work that much stronger through the hazardous waste management plan. So thank you again for joining this morning. And I'll turn it over to our Deputy Director of Office of Environmental Equity, Serlene Grant.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining and making time to be part of this presentation and discussion and hear what we're looking to unfold. So as Katie said, we started, I frequently say we are not your grandfather's DTSC. We are not the DTSC of old. We started with Director Meredith Williams and putting emphasis on equity and environmental justice. And we're continuing that under the great leadership of Katie. It's really a pleasure to work with her because she gets it. And so in doing that, we want to be transparent and inclusive with our decision-making, with our programs as we roll out different programs such as this one. And we talk a lot about environmental justice and equity, but I want to make sure people understand what we're talking about. And in short, environmental justice means that when we're making rulings and decisions, be it for DTSC or any other policy, local planning, government, any policies or any development, that we're not doing it at the expense of one group of people, one stakeholder, one community over another, that we are really looking at the data and we're looking at the evidence, the windshield surveys. We're looking at communities that will be impacted to make sure that the impacts, there are a lot of things that are going to happen that impact us. I mean, someone could build a building next to where I am and I'm impacted by shadows. So there's always impacts with any kind of change, but we look at how those impacts affect all of us. And we weigh the data on that and the level of those impacts. So that's what environmental justice is. It's to find, the justice where previously we've had injustice. And we do that also with the equity lens. And again, environmental justice and equity, we say these things all the time. And, just the real quick 2-second definition on that, equity is not equality. Equity is making sure everybody has what they need, not necessarily everybody has the same thing. And so we use these phrases all the time, but we are, like I said, it's not our grandfather's DTSC. And this DTSC, not only are we using the phrasing, but we're also applying the principles as foundation to our work. And that's why we're here today. And that's why we're having this presentation. So that's all I have to say for now. And I'll turn it back over to Ryan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Katie and Serlene. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Dominguez. I'm the supervisor for the Hazardous Waste Management Plan unit. Thanks for joining us today. This is our 9th workshop of our workshop series. The series was developed to provide ongoing public education and encourage continued discussions during the development of our hazardous waste management plan. As a reminder, quickly, you can access the 2023 Hazardous Waste Management Report on our webpage. This report is providing the basis for discussion and information and data that we're using to draw information from and include and help inform in our hazardous waste management plan. Data from this report is key. So you can access the website and the report using the QR code here on the slide. If you can go to the next slide, please. And we are going to do a poll on this slide. We typically do a poll to gauge who's in the audience, if folks are familiar with our project, and it helps us level set. And there it is. And we'll give this 30 seconds or so for folks to fill out. So there's 2 primary questions. Have you read our 2023 Hazardous Waste Management Report? And the second, have you attended any of our previous workshops? And let's go ahead and wrap that up. Just 2 questions this time, pretty straightforward. Okay, so results. We have about 40 respondents and 30 have not read our report, so about 75%. And about 25 out of the 40 have attended a previous workshop. So it's about 60% and about a little over 64%, 36 that have not. So we have a number of new folks here, which is great. We love that. And so I usually here I'll give a little background on what this hazardous waste management plan project is. So in 2021, Senate Bill 158 was approved and it made changes to the Health and Safety Code 25135. Now the changes require the department to complete hazardous waste management reports that feed information into hazardous waste management plans. In 2023, DTSC published the first hazardous waste management report. We're using the information in that report to draft the first hazardous waste management plan. It's due by March 2025. So coming up pretty quick. The draft plan will be presented to the Board of Environmental Safety for approval. And then the cycle starts again. This is an iterative process. So we're currently using the information in that first report and the feedback that we've received over the last couple of years to develop the hazardous waste management plan. Now, this plan will include specific goals and recommendations that relate to the information that we're discussing throughout these 10 workshops. Next slide, please. So these workshops have focused on topics that are based on public feedback that we've received over the last couple of years. And they provide additional information that's related to the hazardous waste management plan and its development. Each workshop is recorded. So if you have missed any or want to go back and view the presentations again, please visit the Hazardous Waste Management Plan workshop page on our website. We have one workshop remaining, and that's coming up on the 20th next week. And looking forward to that one. It's about analytical testing methods that we use for hazardous waste identification. Next slide, please. Now, if you've read our report or if you haven't, and I'll just give a little primer, we identified 4 areas of focus for hazardous waste management planning. These 4 areas were informed by feedback and comments that we've received during the development of the 2023 report, and then workshops that were held during the release of that report. One of the focus areas that we received significant feedback in is environmental justice. We've also received feedback that it's a little confusing why EJ is a focus area for hazardous waste management planning. And our understanding of this confusion is that EJ should be embedded in each program. So splitting it out as its own focus area was confusing for some. Now, we agree that EJ should be embedded in each program, and we think that DTSC has made great strides in the last several years to incorporate environmental justice into each program. We also recognize that more can be accomplished. Not only are EJ considerations becoming more embedded in DTSC's programs, it is something that is a main focus for planning. However, the connection to that EJ focus is not always obvious. An example of this is also a key element to the hazardous waste management plan, which is waste reduction. Now, I want to call back to our first workshop where we discussed that the quantity of hazardous waste being shipped off-site has reduced by 20 to 40%, depending on the year, since the year 2000. This means that less hazardous waste is being managed in communities. We also discussed potential approaches that could help foster more reduction, and we talked about those in the first and third workshop. In order to accomplish this, steps are needed to rebuild the extensive knowledge of the many industries that generate hazardous waste to encourage more reduction of hazardous waste. A deep knowledge is needed to best concentrate efforts on specific waste streams in specific locations like generators in disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. DTSC is in a position to further incorporate more environmental justice into new or rejuvenated programs. In planning, we're developing recommendations for programs like waste reduction that can leverage the lessons learned from current initiatives. While we work to do this, we can take steps to address other areas of concern that we've heard, like improving access to information and getting that information out to communities. We can also collaborate with communities to help identify areas of concern in certain waste streams that could help reduce potential impacts from those wastes. Current initiatives should be learned from, so successful approaches to environmental justice can be applied. Now, today we've invited our environmental justice and tribal affairs group to talk about their office, their role, and a few current projects that lessons can be drawn from. We've had the pleasure of collaborating with this group, and I would like to introduce the group's manager, Andres Martinez, to take us through the rest of the presentation. We have a set of discussion questions at the end of his presentation, and we'll open it up for discussion at that time. If you have questions or feedback, we can unmute those who want to speak aloud, or if you don't, if you prefer to type your question or comment, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. It's a little easier for us than the chat feature, so we highly encourage the Q&A feature. With that, let's go to the next slide, and Andres, please take us away.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for setting up this meeting. Like you said, I'm really happy to have collaborated with you and your team on this. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andres Martinez. I'm the Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs Manager here at DTSC. In this portion of the workshop, I'll be presenting and discussing how EJ is integrated and how we advance environmental justice throughout our programs at DTSC through some examples. We'd like to hear from you at the end of the presentation how we can better advance DTSC, given what you know and your experience within your communities. Quick outline of what we're going to be looking at today is we're a team of 4 staff members, and I'd like to take some time to introduce the Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs teams assigned to offices across California and to serve as liaisons for our EJ communities to bring their voices and suggestions to DTSC programs and decisions. We're also guided by we'll also talk about the principles that we're guided by, which focus on fairness and equity. We coordinate with our internal staff on our role and with our internal programs to consult on any opportunities that we identify to advance EJ. We meet with EJ and community groups who have an interest and would like to provide feedback and commentary, like in this workshop, and any other opportunities that we can communicate with our communities. EJ is no longer a proposed component of what we should do. Rather, it's now a goal that we work towards in every aspect of our work, especially in those communities that are most impacted by our programs, projects, and initiatives. We'll go over a couple of future initiatives and then how DTSC applies EJ into our programs. So in our first introduction, you've already met me, and I'd like to take some time to introduce our other EJ staff that reports within the EJ and Tribal Affairs program. For the EJ and Tribal team, if you could please turn on your cameras and introduce yourselves, your title, and the location of your home office. Abraham?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abraham John. I currently work in the Sacramento office up in Northern California.
Thank you, Abraham. Claudia?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claudia Baron. I'm the EJ and Tribal Affairs Specialist at Chatsworth.
And Marisol?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am also an EJ and Tribal Affairs Coordinator up in Sacramento. Great to be here.
Thank you all. And as you can see, we're a dynamic team with representation both in Northern and Southern California with the purpose of supporting our communities, as best we can. So our mission, a key piece of legislative language that was first placed in the government code, is the definition of what EJ is and how it's defined, since regulatory agencies like DTSC can refer to it and determine how our mission supports the advancement. Our EJ program below is our EJ program mission below in the Office of Environmental Equity focuses on communication and engagement. Our program's mission promotes EJ across the department and upholds our departmental mission to protect the people and environment of California from harmful chemicals, broaden transparency, support precautionary approaches, challenge any identified inequities, and work with our community partners to develop community-led decisions. Our programmatic mission directly supports the protection of the people and environment of California with an EJ-focused lens. We use our EJ principles of fairness and equity to help us advance EJ in our most vulnerable communities and focus on collaborating in our internal programs and external community partners to support our departmental mission. We work in partnership with our programs to establish an open and trust-based relationship within our communities and provide them with all the information that they need to be informed about DTSC's activities. We regularly look for opportunities to collaborate on projects where the impact on those communities would be significant based on those activities, and providing access to staff, access to information, resources, and an open line of communication with any other agencies that could potentially assist in the community's concerns in projects and programs or initiatives that DTSC may not have a regulatory authority over. We have a focus on equity by elevating the voices of community members and those in vulnerable communities to ensure fairness. EJ is no longer just an air, land, and water issue. It is a consideration of all environmental burdens, public health, vulnerability, social injustices, educational barriers, and economic demographics of a community and the unequal distribution of those burdens. The objectives of our staff and our office is dedicated to enhancing the capacity of our communities to promote and support sustainable development in the communities that we serve. And we do that by sharing in the decision-making processes of DTSC's programs and increasing the transparency on how decisions are made and where the opportunities for engagement are for our communities. We improve the access to DTSC staff and provide assistance with information sharing. We identify how community data and information and feedback can better inform how DTSC makes its decisions. We attend conferences, whether virtually and in person, workshops, again, virtually and in person, and participate in community events organized by EJ organizations, which allows us to actively listen to the concerns of the communities in which they reside. And ultimately, we ask ourselves, did the support that we provide lead to meaningful community engagement? Did it provide transparency? Did it provide accurate information and accessible information? And did we identify any additional opportunities within the interested community? How are the impacts on the community identified, and did we address them? And how could we use those outcomes for our approach on other projects as well? We work with staff within DTSC to help them understand the impacts of DTSC's actions. And most importantly, we share experiences with staff on how we collaborate with the community and our regulatory agency to broaden the awareness and develop EJ goals within our programs, projects, and initiatives. So how do we approach these injustices in communities? I think this is a really good example of where we've come from and then where we are now. So this figure, we'll look back and we can identify what could have possibly led to the creation of these injustices. I'll draw your attention to the top left corner. Historically, government and systematic inequities through policies, language, and decisions established a norm for those communities experiencing injustice, which now permeates itself as an implicit bias. Those living in these communities are discouraged to participate in due to the loss of agency and the internalization of that established norm of expectation, that these inequities reside only within these communities. Further disengagement with government agencies and regulatory agencies is seen as apathetic, and additional pollution burdens ultimately placed in these communities, as many times are perceived to not have an active role or opinion of where these these inequities are placed. And as a result, pollution manifests in the places of least resistance. What I'd like to identify now, and it was stated by our Deputy Director, Charlene Grant, is that in order for us to break the cycle, regulatory agencies like DTSC must place a focus on environmental justice and incorporate environmental justice in how we develop our policies and make decisions to advance EJ and address inequities from the left side of the figure to take the responsibility in our own decisions and actions. Once that commitment and responsibility is taken, the government agency can then partner with communities by establishing lines of trust-based communication and develop collaborative programs and solutions to address these injustices that they are experiencing. This is where shared and achievable goals are developed with the community. And by following through on these partnerships and commitments, we can increase the trust in government agency, which leads to a more involved and engaged community in decisions that affect them most. Ultimately, our dedication to community partnerships are key to breaking the cycle of injustice and build trust. So we're now operating in the right side of the circle. For our future initiatives in our program, as it evolves, we'll continue to focus on providing support across our programs and promote community capacity. We want to identify additional opportunities that we can use community and EJ data into DTSC's decisions and programs, and coordinate with other BDOs within Cali, PA, and other agencies to assist with addressing those burdens that DTSC does not have direct responsibility over. We look internally within our programs to identify where we may find opportunities to collaborate and develop strategies that advance EJ across our department. And in our commitment to fairness and equity, we also continue working with our tribal governments to solicit their input on how DTSC's work specifically impacts them and their cultural resources. What I'd like to present in the next few slides are some examples from our three primary programs at DTSC on how EJ was embedded into the work that we do, since each program has a distinct responsibility of protecting the people and environment of California. Each program will have a unique approach to advancing EJ on how environmental justice is embedded into each of its programs. The first of three programs that I'll go over is a site mitigation and restoration program, sometimes abbreviated as SMRP. Site mitigation and restoration program is charged with restoring and safeguarding communities through the investigation and remediation or cleanup of contaminated properties. The two examples of how site mitigation has advanced EJ are the work conducted by staff on the project surrounding the now closed X-Site facility and the cleanup in vulnerable communities initiative. So the first example, the X-Site facility is now a closed operation where the processing and recycling of lead acid batteries was performed. The facility operated in an interim status and was identified to have contaminated residencies in an area of approximately 1.7 miles surrounding the facility in the areas predominantly populated by Spanish-speaking Latino and Latina communities. Since its initiation, the project has cleaned up over 5,500 properties, and it could not have been as successful as it is if it wasn't for the partnership and engagement with residents of communicating, participating, and coordinating with DTSC staff. Feedback from communities has been essential in how the work is conducted, from providing information in a manner that is accessible to the community, applying lessons learned on how to engage with communities on other projects, and coordinating with community organizations, EJ organizations, local officials' offices, to provide the foundation for an open dialogue and trust-based relationships within the department and its staff. Additionally, as part of the original funding of the X-Site cleanup project, the work program, WERC, or the Workforce Environmental Restoration in Communities program, and targeted hiring requirement provided support to recruit, identify individuals from the affected and surrounding areas to be trained, certified, and licensed environmental workers to be hired on the X-Site project through a partnership with Laborers International Union of North America, where the impact of the project would also advance the restorative and economic justice in communities most affected. The ongoing conversations in the X-Site project and interactions with the advisory committee and working groups with representatives from the community address concerns as they arise, rather than taking a reactionary approach when issues are encountered while the project continues. The second example that I have for site mitigation is the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative. It was mentioned previously that Senate Bill 158 focused on hazardous waste management plan reduction, but it also included funding in the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program to provide financial support within the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative. Within the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative, there are 5 programs. I have 3 here and another 2 on the next slide. The first program that I wanted to focus on is the Equitable Community Revitalization Grants Program. That program tackles environmental harm head-on by funding regulatory agency-managed assessments, investigations, and cleanups that support the transformation of blighted, polluted properties into safe, vital community assets like parks, affordable housing, or essential retail such as grocery stores or other community assets. Funding has supported over 91 projects across the state over 2 rounds of funding. The second program within the Site Mitigation Restoration Program, CVCI program, or Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities program, is a discovery and enforcement program. And that was established through the initiative to address dry cleaning sites that have released chemicals into vulnerable communities. There are over 112 sites being assessed in the program in communities affected by multiple burdens, and the Discovery and Enforcement Program seeks to address the historical contributions of these past and current dry cleaning sites. The third program, Workforce Development, focused on implementing a statewide student internship program that promoted the hiring of individuals from vulnerable communities across the state with educational backgrounds in public health, community engagement, environmental justice, and related program fields within the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative. These internships were established in the year of November of 2023 and completed their internship at the end of June 2024. These interns receive firsthand experience in the public sector and environmental sector careers, and in addition to conducting research on projects that align with each student's area of study and respective vulnerable community. Through mentorship, training, and networking opportunities, the program provided career readiness for opportunities for these students. Some of the outcomes that came from the internship program in the workforce development program were engagement on how to best engage with communities that DTSC performs work in, that expose these students to practical experience, how to develop community capacity, and actionable research. The other two programs within the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities initiative within the Site Mitigation and Restoration program are the Technical Assistance Grants and the Community Benefits Agreement. The Technical Assistance Program will allow communities to hire independent technical advisors to assist with understanding and participating in response actions for DTSC sites. These awards range anywhere between $40,000 and $150,000 and is on a rolling schedule. It began in December 23 and funds are encumbered until June 2025. All grantees have until January of 2027 to complete their grant activities. And this program provides technical information for those communities that may not otherwise have access to technical advisors to understand the activities that DTSC is performing within their communities. And the fifth program, Community Benefits Agreement, or Community Benefits Agreement Policy, will focus on DTSC's current authority to require community benefit agreements within sites and within the vision of applying community benefit agreements more broadly in the future. The policy shall focus on sites with a financially viable responsible party and ultimately providing communities with additional benefits from DTSC projects other than those addressing cleanup activities in the project site itself. The other primary program that DTSC focuses on is Safer Consumer Products, or SCP. The Safer Consumer Products program aims to accelerate the quest for safer chemicals in consumer products. The Safer Consumer Products program regulations establish a science-based process to identify specific products that contain potentially harmful chemicals and evaluate potential safer alternatives. The two examples that I have here on the left first is the Healthy Nail Salon Recognition Program. These efforts expand on the work that DTSC had already begun in 2019. In 2019, DTSC announced its intention to prioritize nail products containing toluene, among other chemicals, which can harm the nervous system and respiratory tract and is a developmental toxin that can affect fetuses. These chemicals that are measured above California regulatory standards in nail salons and proposed regulations are being drafted to designate nail coatings and other thinners containing toluene as a priority product. It would require manufacturers to either eliminate the chemical in these nail products or seek safer alternatives. Salon workers' exposure to these chemicals is exacerbated by several factors. First is that the population that these chemicals affect are focused around Asian women, older Asian women or of Asian descent. They work long hours, many times in poorly ventilated spaces. They are not provided with accurate information regarding the chemical safety, and they don't have the proper protective equipment. The second example within Safer Consumer Products is hair straightening products from salon exposure. The use of hair straightening products in salons and homes and the potential to cause or contribute adverse impacts from exposure to candidate chemicals. The study in this initiative identified 35 different endocrine disrupting or asthma associated chemicals. The exposure of these products are primarily used by women of color and for many times across the entirety of their life. Follow-up steps would create a draft product chemical profile and additional workshops and propose priority products as safer alternatives within hair products. The third example within Safer Consumer Products is an example of the overlap between the environmental justice and tribal components of our office. The work on 6PPD focuses on the exposure of salmonid populations that are biological and cultural significance to the environment and to tribes. It is one of several anti-ozonants that protect the rubber in tires from ozone. The effect of the 6-PPD chemical on salmonid populations has resulted in a significant mortality events in the state of Washington, and DTSC has initiated the process of placing 6-PPD on a priority list of chemicals to seek potentially safer alternatives. The third program within DTSC, the Hazardous Waste Management Program, or HWMP, issues, denies, revokes, and modifies hazardous waste facility permits. It conducts regular and targeted inspections of facilities that manage hazardous waste, and it responds to complaints of illegal storage, treatment, or disposal of hazardous waste, or other illegal activities. They also enforce California's hazardous waste control law and regulations and regulate the hazardous waste from when it is first generated to when it is disposed. The two examples that I've identified here that help advance environmental justice within DTSC, first is the Kettleman Hills Waste Facility. Kettleman Hills is a waste facility in Kettleman City, and this year has drafted a draft permit decision, and as part of the decision, has implemented a novel approach to issuing the permit which considers the impact and effects the facility has in the surrounding vulnerable communities, starting with data identified from CalEnviroscreen. This is a step in the right direction to assess all aspects of how a facility not only operates and is regulated, but also is determining what the impact on already vulnerable communities to identify where DTSC can assist with addressing those impacts before a final draft decision is made. The second example into the Hazardous Waste Management Program is Senate Bill 673. Since its adoption in 2015, DTSC is required to consider adopting new hazardous waste permit criteria in California regulations and implement programmatic reforms. DTSC began adopting new permit regulations and programmatic reforms in 2019, and in 2021, DTSC proposed a framework to implement permit criteria related to community vulnerability and setback distance. In response to public input received, DTSC has revised the framework to better address the public's comments and propose further programmatic reform. There have been two recent informational sheets that have been released, and these two informational sheets exemplify the advancement of environmental justice within our DTSC program, HWMP, and our mission. The first goal within SB 673 is to provide opportunities for earlier public engagement. We expand on the current requirements so that permit applicants will need to complete a community engagement activity. Those activities can be open houses, discussion with community-based organizations, conducting surveys, and engagement overall, before they actually submit any new permit or permit renewal. We are identifying and creating mechanisms for the public to see how DTSC has considered their input through the permitting process, therefore increasing transparency of the department and its decision-making process. The second goal in SB 673 is similar to what was mentioned in the Kettleman Hills facility permit decision. There must now be a consideration of community vulnerability in the permit decisions and conditions. Permit applicants must complete a community vulnerability profile to determine if they are in a disadvantaged community. The applicants for facilities in disadvantaged communities or those otherwise directed to do so by DTSC would complete a community vulnerability assessment to determine what vulnerability issues and lived experiences are occurring in the community, identify any local and regional sources of pollution, evaluate and discuss the relationship between the facility, local and regional sources of pollution, and community health, and ultimately proposing strategies to address facilities' impact on the community. The first two informational sheets are out, and the third goal is anticipated to be released at the beginning of 2025. Now that we have these examples provided as a way for us to highlight how DTSC has advanced environmental justice in our programs, I'd then like to move to our directed question session within DTSC on how we could better advance the regulation of hazardous waste in our vulnerable communities. So please feel free to place your questions in the question and answer, raise your hand, or request to be unmuted to ask your question. I'll move on to the next question. So the first discussion question for attendees is, how can DTSC support waste reduction strategies in disadvantaged communities or vulnerable communities or in our EJ communities? I'll look into the Q&A for questions. I see the first question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, while folks are thinking about this question, there's two loaded up in here, and we can touch those if you want to do that while people think about this one and they can raise their hand.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me open up my question window. And I see a question here from Veronica Aguirre. What is DTSC's jurisdiction on enforcing local employment and other types of projects? Given the different types of projects that DTSC works on, we would want to work closely with local. Sorry, I think someone's still on.
I think the background noise is coming from Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. So DTSC first initiated the program on the Exide project, where funding around workforce development was provided by the initial funding. Other projects, depending on the size or an overall program that we can implement within DTSC, would require a partnership between local agencies, workforce centers, and DTSC to require our policies to state that any project would impose a hiring requirement. But a hiring requirement wouldn't be enough if we don't have the workforce to develop it. So internally, in our workforce development program with a Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities initiative, one of the first arms that we started was focused around an academic component of advancing environmental justice within these student internships. The other arm would be working very closely with regional workforce centers to determine what the availability of individuals would be, and how to create language within our policies to require certain responsible parties to place local individuals within the community on those projects themselves. So I think it's one of those situations where, in order to get to where we want, like what we had in the workforce development, workforce environmental restoration and communities program like Exide, is to develop a program of identification, certification, and training. So and once those programs are established, we can then develop internal policies that on particular projects where the workforce is available and ready to be trained up, and then having our responsible party partners to hire those individuals. Hope that answers your question.
We have a couple hands up.
Sure.
I think the first one was Michelle Drake, though Michelle's hand's been up for a while, and I'm not sure if it's intentional. So Michelle, nope, just went down. Faith Batista has her hand up. Alejandro, do you want to unmute Faith?
Okay, I've go Faith, I've go ahead and I've sent you a request to unmute you. You can go ahead and speak when you'd like. You do have to unmute yourself though, so I've put a request in to unmute you through the chat. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
We can
can. Thank you. Go
hear
ahead.
you.
Oh, okay. Loud and clear. Okay. Just double checking. Hello, my name is Conception Solis. I'm with Time and Destiny. And
Yes,
will permits at in-state landfills such as air, water, quality, land use to be revised prior to an in-state municipal landfill being able to accept California hazardous contaminated soil under alternative management standards.
I had a little hard time. It was breaking up a little bit, but I think I caught most of it.
Is it
And
is it is it on my end or yours?
I'm not sure, but let me see if I can rephrase and if this addresses the crux of the question. What are the considerations being made for municipal landfills if alternative management standards are developed?
Hello?
Was that?
No, I asked, will permits in state landfills such as air, water quality, land use need to be revised prior to an in-state municipal landfill being able to accept California hazardous contaminated soil under alternative management standards?
Sure. Okay. So will permits need to be revised?
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So the process that goes under is so for alternative management standards, they are a certain set of requirements that are developed to say these facilities have to be designed in a certain way to accept certain types of waste. The best example that I can provide, or one example I can provide, is for treated wood waste. In part, the treated wood waste alternative management standards talk about the type of landfill that would be allowed or is allowed to accept treated wood waste. There are also other requirements that fall under other parts of the regulations or statutes that are implemented by CalRecycle and the Water Board. We did a workshop on this last week where we talked about what those requirements are and how those are organized between the various agencies. So I do recommend turning back to that workshop to look at it. Short answer is the waste, it would fall into the waste discharge requirements as in part for the Water Board and the permit for under CalRecycle. And so they share responsibilities for oversight of those two of municipal landfills. So I guess in essence, they would have to look and see if the waste discharge requirements would require modification or not.
It looks like we don't have any more hands raised, but we do have some open Q&A questions. Did you want to go ahead and take care of those now, or did you want to continue with the presentation?
Let's try to take down some of these questions since there's so many, and I think they're worth addressing. Is that okay, Alejandro?
Wonderful. I'll go ahead and read these out because that way it'll make it easier for our transcripts and our translators. So please bear with me, folks, but I'm going to read these questions out and our staff will answer them. So first, coming from Veronica Aguirre, what is DTSC's jurisdiction on enforcing local employment and other types of projects?
Oh, I think that was the first question I
Yeah, we
answered.
took care of that one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's close that out.
and Veronica, if you still have any questions, feel free to ask again if it wasn't responded to outly.
Okay,
We're done.
coming from, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Let's see, coming from Marty Walters. I appreciate the recognition of enforcement as a key part of the mission of environmental justice. One of the challenges of working on a project like hazardous waste identification is trying to understand how leakage from the regulatory system is occurring because generators either don't understand the regulations or use exclusions and exemptions inappropriately. How are you working with Koopas to close this gap within the regulated community?
Great. Thanks, Alejandro, and thank you, Marty. This is a great question since I've been working closely with our enforcement team and learning how they've really taken the role of our environmental justice activity in action. Anytime there's a concern, any identified inappropriate disposal of any degree, that our enforcement team is people in action, that there's a response. There's a call or a concern. It ultimately gets to our enforcement team, and there are people from our staff from DTSC that go out and provide, an actionable investigation at this site or location. So, I'm working really closely, or our team is working really closely on how enforcement is taking on that taking on that responsibility. In terms of how we work with Koopas to close the gap of within a regulated community when there are potential leakages, or if there are releases that either aren't captured, we rely very closely on our informed community. And one of the ways that we try to participate and place ourselves in a position where we're hearing what the community is experiencing is by participating in our different environmental justice networks and IVAN networks, so that we're present and listen to what the concerns are. Or if there is any information that community members are looking to receive from DTSC's end, we provide that information as well. And I am aware that in some IVAN networks, we do have representatives from the local Koopa that help us investigate and identify potential sources of either illegal dumping or concerns around hazardous waste. So this is the portion of our staff's responsibility to engage and build community capacity within the presence of those in those networks and community meetings.
Can I tag on to that, Andres?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan.
And just for clarification, the Koopas are the Certified Unified Program Agencies.
Thank you.
And they are responsible for implementing 6 different programs across the state, one of which is related to, one primary one is related to hazardous waste, and that generators. They're the main boots on the ground that go and inspect and enforce generators. And our enforcement also provides exactly what Andres was talking about here. There's a Koopa support branch within our enforcement and emergency response division. The DTSC also provides assistance to and training to the Koopas. We work with and collaborate with the Koopas on various issues. There's a number of coordination calls and collaboration. I will say that that's something that we're hoping to do more of. One item that we've identified in this planning project has been kind of the historical perspective. DTSC used to have this a source reduction program, which is reducing hazardous waste before it's generated. So it's swapping different things out, different products out or components of a system. There's a workshop on this topic also that you can revisit. But the main point of that one is DTSC had a function to provide that technical support to generators and to Koopas in the past. Given there was some changes that happened around 2008 to 2012 that we talked about in one of those workshops that talks about the transition into safer consumer products, and what happened with the resources in that. But we have identified that support of Coupas and understanding of generators as a thing that was very good. It was an information hub for hazardous waste generation, and it's something that we're hoping to do more of. We need additional resources to do that, but it's something that we've identified as very important to help support the Coupas and our partners across the state in that endeavor.
Great, thank you, Ryan.
Okay, I've been informed that Veronica Aguirre is actually Brian Cadena from Green Action, so thanks for pointing that out, Brian. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but I know that we have a question coming from you, and that is, given the concerns surrounding potential conflicts of interest in the previous civil rights analysis conducted for Kettleman City, specifically due to the involvement of a law firm with ties to Cali, PA, how does DTSC plan to address and prevent such conflicts in future analysis?
Great, thank you, Brian. Oh, did we have someone else wanting to answer?
No, that was Serlene. I was like, I think this is more in my court than in the hazardous waste management plan per se.
Yeah, I'll hand that off to you, please.
And I'll just say briefly, Brian. Good morning, Brian. Your question is rather timely as we are right now having discussions about a scope for part 2 of the civil rights analysis. So we are committed to having part 2 done, and maybe that will address some of your concerns about the neutrality of the civil rights analysis. We haven't done it yet. We haven't put out the scope. We're talking about it. Our team is talking about it. So Alejandro, next question, please.
Thanks, Serlene. That's coming from Shreyashi Sharma. Hi, I am a local community member. My question is, how will DTSC assess and mitigate impacts to disadvantaged communities near in-state municipal landfills that may receive California hazardous contaminated soil if alternative management standards are proposed?
Thank you. I think the main part is working with our sister agencies, our partners, CalRecycle, the Water Board, DTSC, and then the air districts, local air districts, and local communities to understand how best to what are the needs and what are the concerns. Some of the concerns, groundwater contamination, air, soil, surface water. Those concerns are part of the discussion. As we were talking about last week in the landfill workshop, if you have specific concerns, please submit those to us. Or if you have certain suggestions on considerations to make, please submit those to us. We were asking for those last week, and we are hoping to receive feedback and that type of information of concerns. So I think high level, working with our sister agencies to best understand how facilities are operated and designed so they can be designed accordingly.
Thanks, Ryan. Coming from Marty Walters. My answer to the question about waste reduction strategies. More effective and consistent enforcement by Coupas. Some Coupas and EJ communities don't themselves have the knowledge and experience to effectively enforce hazardous waste regulations. Thank you, Marty. Coming from Brian Cadena from Green Action. Are the vulnerability assessments done by a third party or by the facility applying for the permit? If done by a third party, is it paid by the facility? Does the third party report to the facility for final publishing or to DTSC?
I think I could make a quick comment on that for the vulnerability assessments that information and determination of how it'll be done is still in the process for SB 673. But we welcome any of the feedback that you have around independent analysis. When we first did it within Gentleman, we did it internally within DTSC to identify what the vulnerabilities are using Cal and ViroScreen. But if there's additional ways to collect the information, either in partnership with the community or community organizations, it'd be really great to hear that so we can incorporate it into any of our future initiatives for Goal 2 within SB 673.
Thanks, Andres.
Yep.
Karen Abode, representing Time and Destiny Church. What type of public and community engagement will occur at each in-state municipal landfill that would receive California hazardous contaminated soil if alternative management standards are processed?
Hi, Karen, and thank you for that question. What type of public engagement? Well, first, the alternative management standards need to be developed, and that's what we're looking at and considering now. So this is part of the public engagement of process. We're looking for feedback now on what considerations should be made. Then, if it depends on how the alternative management standard is set. There's my understanding is that one example that I've been going back to is for treated wood waste. It's written into a law that treated wood waste can go to specific types of landfills, and then after that is where it picks up into the requirements of the Water Board and Cal Recycle. I'm not well versed in what their public engagement looks like for those approvals or the various processes and approvals that they have. Waste discharge requirements are one type. The Cal Recycle also has a permit. One thing I could do is reach out to them and ask like what their public engagement process looks like. I don't know exactly that for those types of approvals. But I do highly recommend going back to our last week, the presentation we did last week, to begin to hear some of the process, to hear some of the considerations that are being made, because this is part of that public engagement process right now.
Thanks, Ryan. An anonymous attendee. You need to be boots on the ground. If you don't have the workforce to enter our communities, you need to work with legit nonprofits to help educate the community and provide those resources and services that are lacking in these underserved communities. Also work with the industry itself to catch this toxic materials at the beginning of production and not try to be reactive to the waste. Thank you for that comment. Coming from Brian Cadena. Well, actually, I'm sorry, this is actually from Veronica Aguirre. Hi, I'm Veronica Aguirre with CCEJN. I shared my link with my colleagues. My apologies. Thank you very much for clearing that up, Veronica. We'll go ahead and make sure that people are clear as to who is speaking when we call on them. Thank you very much for that.
And I'm not sure which Veronica has their hand up, but there's a hand up in the attendees.
Okay, I'll go ahead and unmute this person. There you go.
Hi, this is Cesar Aguirre, one of the coworkers that Veronica shared her link with. She thought it was an important meeting with awesome info, so she shared it around. So thank you to Veronica and thank you to y'all for a lot of the information that you shared. I had a question about, I think it was 673, SB 673. It sounds like a lot of the community engagement and the rules around the requirements for the new permitting needs under 673 are still being developed. And I'm wondering if those are conversations that are solely going to be internal, or is there going to be a workshop with the proposed adoptions for the new rules and the new community engagement needs and guidelines that we can have a comment period on? Or is that just going to be something that happens within the agency itself?
Thank you. This is Cesar, right? Cesar Aguirre?
Correct.
Okay. Hi, Cesar. So yeah, I'm working closely with the SB 673 team, and before we open up any workshops and feedback, we want to get all three phases. So that way, the communication and information that's out can be linked together as to how they support each other. But there will be an opportunity for community workshops, engagement, and feedback once all are out, so we can get information from the communities as to how the current proposal for SB 673 and the issuing of permits most affects communities and can best inform us on how we can make the best decisions possible.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that the informational sheet 2 that we came out with on community vulnerabilities will be agendized at the December Board of Environmental Safety meeting. So that will be an opportunity to provide public comments verbally. And then we also have the online survey to provide your feedback. But like Andres said, there's no formal comment period with a deadline at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar.
Okay, and it looks like we have one more comment that is in the Q&A. It's from Michelle Wong. Alternative management strategies should include biochar and bioremediation on site. And that looks like that is all the Q&A that we have, and hands up have all been addressed.
Okay, we have another discussion question that we could go to.
Sure. I'll go ahead and move it over to the next one. The discussion question here is, does your community have access to household hazardous waste collection? Do you know where to dispose of hazardous waste? Do you have hazardous waste collection facility in your area? And is there anything that DTSC can do to support the information on how to properly identify or dispose of hazardous waste? Household hazardous waste, correction.
While people are thinking, I can provide a little more context to the question. A piece of feedback that we've received pretty consistently over the last couple of years is regarding household hazardous waste and collection and locations for it. Our understanding is it can be difficult, and part of that maybe people may not know where or that these facilities even exist, or what household hazardous waste is. And so it's a piece of information that we're trying to gather more information about, so we can have more data, it can be more clear. In addition to local community members, working towards coordinating more or talking more about the collection of these of household hazardous waste at various locations. There are temporary events that pop up where people can go and drop off household hazardous waste. There's permanent locations, municipal landfills or municipal facilities, transfer stations try and pick it out when they can. They process it so they can pull out household hazardous waste rather than getting it into the landfill. However, it is something that we're working to better understand, and so we can understand how best to try and encourage more collection, because more collection of household hazardous waste means less is ending up in a landfill. We have a couple of comments in here. Alejandro, you want to read those out?
Sure. Coming from Marty Walters, my county does not provide HHW collection. Recently, a neighboring county hosted an HHW collection event and turned away anyone that was not a resident in that county.
Wow.
Rural area.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Marty.
And then from Elizabeth Rowan, we have a link that was shared. And it looks like it's a list of household hazardous waste. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. And we do not have any more hands raised or open questions at this time.
Great. Okay. I can move to the third question. Is that all right, Ryan?
Yeah.
All right. The question for the attendees is, how is illegal waste disposal tracked in your area? Are there other ways to better track illegal disposal? Or how is illegal hazardous waste disposal reported or tracked in your community? I think we touched on some topics around Koopas and participating in IVANs and enforcement. But would anyone like to share or has any comments on your awareness or information or knowledge on how illegal waste is tracked in your region or area?
If you do,
in the chat.
yeah, I don't see anything in the chat either. And some context for this question, there are a couple different avenues that we've seen where illegal waste disposal is tracked. Often, those tracking mechanisms don't indicate if it was identified as hazardous or not. It's more of a kind of a log. And so it's hard for us to identify where, like, if something is a hazardous waste or not, when it is managed, or if it's dumped somewhere, and somebody picks it up, or the Koopa goes and cleans it up. Some of that information might not be tracked. If it is hazardous waste, it would end up on a manifest, but that often there's a couple steps down the road, and it's that connection, linking that manifest information to this event is a difficult thing. And so one item that we're working to try and better understand is how can we track this in a more concise or compact way to get a better understanding of illegal disposal. So one piece of that is, if you know how to report illegal disposal of waste, and then how to distinguish if it's hazardous waste, it would be helpful. And so one thought we had was to reach out to the communities and see if you had any ideas. We're also very open to getting emails or calls. So if you don't have any ideas now and something strikes you later while eating dinner or something, feel free to send us a note.
There was a message in the chat. If there's a fact sheet for the determination of hazardous versus non-hazardous waste from DTSC, I think it's a very helpful recommendation. If it's not something that exists already, and if we can find it, we'll share it with you. Or if not, it's one of those opportunities that our EJ and Tribal Affairs team seeks to identify to better provide information to all the communities across the state. Thank you. Thank you, Veronica, or Cesar, or Brian.
And Marty put a note in the chat. Alejandro, I'll just go ahead and I can go ahead and read this one.
Go ahead.
And this is from Marty Walters. I have not seen any tracking or reporting of illegal disposal in my rural region. Because we don't have household hazardous waste collection, there is a fair amount of dumping. I've seen it myself, dumped on public lands and reported to the local environmental department. Thank you, Marty. One other comment came in from Elizabeth. It is very local, city specific, as to how illegally disposed waste is managed.
And just a reminder for everyone, if you could please submit your comments in the question and answer. That way we can track everything rather than managing comments and Q&A. We can better track them for the purposes of our discussion. All right, if there are any additional comments or questions on this question, you want to move to the next question, Ryan?
Yeah.
All right. I'll read this one out. To kind of finalize some of our question Q&A here and discussion questions within the presentation, are there any subject or questions you'd like to DTSC to focus on that would help you better understand hazardous waste management or hazardous waste reduction?
It looks like we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Retail waste, we don't really generate hazardous waste, but some inspectors, Coupa, state broken glass is hazardous, which is confusing. Don't know if this is the venue for this question.
I think I think this is a fairly specific question that might be situational that would be best taken offline. Need some additional information to understand exactly the situation and what the considerations were. I'm getting a chat and that could have been something like CRT glass, or was it like a glass jar that had something in it? And so the situations could be a lot, which is why additional information is needed. One place that you could reach out to is the Regulatory Assistance Office, the RAOs. They're fantastic. They answer a lot of questions. I think we could drop the link in the chat, or and you can also send us an email, and we can direct you to the RAOs, or we can just drop the link to the RAO in the chat as well. I'll try and have someone snag that real quick.
And it looks like we have a couple of questions and, well, a comment and a question in the Q&A. Coming from Kathy Chavez Morris, I think it helps to consider that language is diverse in California. Anything you can offer that illustrates the type of materials that are hazardous is helpful. Thank you for that comment, Kathy. And then coming from, I believe, someone in Green Action, the Veronica Aguirre. Let's see. DTSC acts through Coupa liaison in some counties. is there a threshold or standard operating procedure for interagency communication? And that's from Cesar. Thanks, Cesar.
Threshold or standard procedure.
I wanted to comment on that. There's not one standard operating procedure because DTSC and our staff, even within our own staff, depending on whether it's enforcement or working with site mitigation or hazardous waste, or even our safer consumer products team, it's really project, site, and initiative dependent. If we are made aware of the activities that a Coupa liaison or Coupa staff may be encountering, and they reach out to us, or we're made aware of something that we are then connected, we're made aware of something through community interaction or community conversation that we can then reach out to the local Coupa, then we'll coordinate with them directly to ensure that that line of communication is ensured that we've answered the questions that are out there. But we anytime something comes into us, especially for our environmental justice and tribal affairs team, we do assure that we find the correct response and then feedback to either the Coupa or any other local regulatory agency that could potentially resolve the concern that's being brought up.
To add on a little bit, Coupas also reach out when they need assistance. DTSC invites Coupas on inspections routinely for training and collaboration. So there is that interagency communication, collaboration, sharing of information.
And it looks like that's it in terms of raised hands or open questions at this point.
Great, thank you, Alejandro.
All right. Andres, was this our last question that we had for discussion?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
specifically
that
for
was the last one?
discussion. Yeah, and then
Mhm.
if there's any additional public feedback, any additional commentary that people would like to have, that's essentially the last question or discussion open topic that we want to present to the attendees.
Mhm.
So any additional public feedback or participant feedback that anyone had, feel free. Place your questions in the Q&A, or feel free to raise your hand for us to be aware of what your concerns are around the hazardous waste reduction.
Yeah, and let me while we're waiting for folks to if there's any last questions, I do want to point people back to our previous workshops. We've covered a lot of material over the last few months, and I was said in the beginning, this was our 9th workshop. So there's eight ones prior to this that include information about waste generation, some of our prior programs, pollution prevention program, source reduction and what it is, and where that information is best found for source reduction and what we're trying to do in that area or in that topic. We've touched on our waste criteria, and I saw a couple of questions come through that were related to our waste criteria. And the waste criteria are those considerations or the criteria that are used to identify a hazardous waste. And in California, there's a lot of hazardous waste that's identified as hazardous in California, but not in other states. Those distinctions and those differences are really important to understand, and it's complex. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of chemistry and physics involved in the development of those. And so we've put out a few different workshops. We've talked about our waste criteria in 2022, and in this last workshop, or a couple workshops ago, was a very deep dive into our waste criteria. And then next week, some of the feedback that we've gotten when we have presented out some very specific items out of waste criteria, we're going to be expanding that discussion next week on some very specific test methods that are used to identify ignitable waste. So I highly recommend going back and watching those workshops, reading the report. The report also provides a lot of background or context to help try and explain how California's waste management program works. There was a lot of questions today about the alternative management standards, and those are looking at the potential for alternative management of non-RCRA contaminated soil, and looking at things that are other hazardous wastes that are already allowed alternative management in municipal landfills, like treated wood waste, and what those, and why is that allowed, and to recap part of that, what it is over time, landfilling back in the early 1900s up until the 1970s was not regulated. And then it started to become regulated and has improved over time. They have liners and collection systems for the liquid that ends up at the bottom. So instead of like back in the day, now it's prevented from migrating downwards by a liner system, and it's also removed from the landfill, which didn't happen previously. So there are things that have happened over time that have actually improved protectiveness of the municipal landfills and hazardous waste landfills. Like these things have improved and become more protective, more stringent. And then let's see, what was our, we've also talked about some waste streams that we want to focus on for reduction, the ignitable waste. So we did a workshop on, incinerable waste. We did a workshop on the incinerable waste, and in that we talked about the top waste streams that are incinerable, why we think incinerable waste should be a focus, what incinerators are, and some potential alternative treatment methods. Okay, my filibuster's over. Well,
Okay.
I didn't see any other additional comments or questions come in. So, Andres, I don't know if we want to wrap it up.
Oh yeah, let me check the chat one more time. Q&A. Yeah, if at this point there aren't any additional questions or comments, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I'm going to provide my contact information. Again, if you have any questions that either weren't addressed or if any questions come up after you've taken some time to think about some of the information that was presented here. Again, I appreciate you being here, taking your time out of your schedules. I'm really happy to have worked with the Hazardous Waste Management Plan team to focus on environmental justice and how we've advanced environmental justice in the different programs that we've done. And hopefully they also serve as inspirations or just starting points for us to open up discussions for any individuals from our statewide environmental justice or community groups to identify those opportunities and create additional programs. So at any point later in time that we can highlight a program that we've created, to advance environmental justice in the work that we do within your communities.
Right.
Always happy to
And
help.
And thank Andres and team. Thank you all for this coordination. This was a fantastic experience just working with you all. Was not as familiar with your group prior to this, so this was very informative. In addition, do want to thank our interpreters. As always, thank you all for helping out. And if anybody has any feedback, we do have a post-workshop survey. I think we've been getting a decent response with those and folks filling them out. They have really helped us tweak our approach to these long form workshops and help us with that develop material that is accessible and topical for folks that are interested in each topic. So once again, thank you all for coming. We have one more workshop next week. Stay posted. It's going to be a good one. Right. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Looks like all the connections are in the chat, or all the emails are in the chat. So great.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. Have a nice day.